they receive anything until each of the different entities within the county are made whole for their delinquent properties.
Is the goal to make the schools whole?
The goal is to make all of the parties who have not received their taxes whole. So if the sale of the property was not able to cover the full amount of delinquent taxes, there's be a policy issue up to the different elected individuals to decide. I would think some kind of equitable share of what is there to pay off as much of those taxes as possible.
And my whole, Bob and I have had the last 2 to 3 years to think this process through over and over and over again to try to refine it. My goal has always been that the taxpayers or Delaware County through the DTAC would always get 100% reimbursed for all the outstanding back real estate taxes and interest on every one of these properties. And that was my first and foremost reason for wanting to do this program. The second reason is that when you look at the net proceeds and the Delaware County Finance Authority getting half of the net proceeds, it would help them with building their revolving loan fund, which they've kind of been on their own with trying to build. And it'd be nice for them to be able to get close to $10 million so that they could, start looking at an annual, being able to have real cash, for that $10 million. And then it would give the other net proceeds of the 1/2 coming back to the land bank, because the land bank's gonna have expenses moving forward. So to me, it's a win-win-win situation. This has never been done in the country. We would be the first to do that. I think it's in my mind, a pretty simplistic program to get from A to Z and still be able to stay within the confines of the Ohio Revised Code and the land bank, the land bank regulations is set up by the Ohio legislature and enacted by the commissioners. So, but I just don't see the land bank today. I see the land bank, in my mind, I see the land bank as a property management company. They get these properties that don't sell at this foreclosure tax sales, and they have to clean them up and do what's necessary. We may have to apply for grants. We obviously may spend money on a lot of studies, environmental studies. We may spend a lot of money on engineering and things of that nature. And we're gonna have to manage these properties, and at some point to sell them through a quitclaim deed to the DCFA. DCFA would then become basically the entity that would be selling them. So it takes us out of that realm of having to deal with us being selling the properties. The DCFA would have a year to sell them. If they didn't sell them within that year, they could return them to the land bank. I laugh because I don't want them to return any of these properties to the land bank, but they have the ability to do that. And so we give them a year to then, market the properties and to put together that kind of thing. So it's a win-win-win situation. I don't think the land bank today has the ability of our own staff to do that. The Economic Development Department, I believe, has kind of been the gold star in regards to what they've been able to get accomplished over the last 5 years. And the Delaware County Finance Authority has also, I think, done a pretty good job over the last 5 years. And I think they'd be really good partners for the treasurer and the land bank in this process. So, and I know, I feel comfortable with this whole process and everybody that's involved. And I think that's probably because I've had a chance to work with most of these folks for the last 5 years, and so that really gives us a leg up. But I will tell you that nobody else in the country has thought about this process this far of the way through, and we're on the cutting edge. I think it's just kind of a cool program. I'm sure that there are things that hopefully y'all will bring to the table that will improve the process, because there's no way that we can have thought about everything. But, you know, I just tell you, you know, a lot of thought process has been put through it. This is a good example of how it would work in the end, and, you know, open it up for discussion, maybe how you all think it could be improved.
Well, I'm not prepared to have that discussion today, because I don't know enough to have that discussion today.
Mr. Frommer's got his hand up back there.
I'm sorry?
Mr. Frommer's got his hand up back there.
I had a question.
Probably need Mike,
Michael, you up
come
here.
to the microphone, sorry.
And identify, and I think you need to identify.
I was
who you
trying
are.
to, Mike Fromer, County Administrator. I was going to ask two questions, but you answered one, was the DCFA's involvement. You know, because when the county works with the land bank and DCFA and transferring properties and selling them, it adds another step, okay? And you guys have, the land bank has the ability to sell these properties. So engaging another property or partner, and so I was just curious about that.
Well, I'll tell you my other reason why I think it's a good idea. During the sale of the jail, I had been contacted by a reporter from the Columbus Dispatch, and over about 4 or 5 days of him calling every day, and he's got very good analytical skills. He said to me, tell me why the commissioners, you know, punted on this thing and they sent it to the land bank. And he goes, it sounds a little weird. You know, you got 2 commissioners out of 3, and now you got both of those commissioners on the land bank out of 5. And, you know, tell me the thinking about this, why it's not kind of like their own personal way to, you know, work through the system. And I said, well, I'll just have you go back and look at what's in the Ohio Revised Code, what the legislature did, and so forth and so on. And it's a process that works. But after that discussion with him, I thought, what's the best way to take the concern for pay to play or whatever out of it? And the DCFA had already started doing that and has done very well with it. So in the long run, I just think it's the best way to do that. It reduces, it basically allows the DCFA to focus on selling it, allows the land bank to focus on doing what it needs to take, a unusable, unsellable asset, which may take months, may even take a year to get it to the point that it's a worthwhile asset that can be sold. So there's 2 very different processes involved. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a way of separating them, and I think it's a good idea. And I think it, you know, keeps all of us, well, at least keeps the elected officials who take donations, you know, I think it also helps us, you know. I'm thinking about these 2 as much as I'm thinking about me.
Well, I'm not worried about that, frankly. I don't think it's been an issue.
I think
I do, because
Well,
again, I know, and I agree. And you know what? That's good.
Okay.
I'm glad you don't.
I think
When I was asked that question by a dispatch reporter, I thought through it.
Well, I would answer the question different than you answered it.
Well, I'll have him call you next time.
Please do.
I will.
Yeah, we had a good case study on that because, you know, when the county, we only have certain ways we can dispose of properties. One is like an auction, the other is a public bid, which we did. And we did twice, and you saw the results of that. Yeah. And using the land bank or the finance authority's abilities, we were able, the price. So the other thing too, I would just put on your guys' radar and DCFA's radar. The staffing the DCFA uses is the Economic Development Department. And while I think this is a fantastic program, if there really are 90 parcels that they're actively trying to market, we just need to make sure that there's enough staffing that we're not losing sight of the, to land a data center and do stuff like that. And once again, I'm probably preaching to the choir.
No, you're 100% correct.
And we just need to make sure as to start the process, this is how we start a lot of processes. We use existing staff to stretch a little thinner, but as we get, if 100 parcels there, and I'll like I said, I think it's great that the finance authority, but the staffing is economic development. We just need to make sure that we're not getting stretched too thin and missing the opportunities. And I would say the same.
And
with
I promise
DCFA
you
too.
that won't happen.
So-
As I said, the budget will change substantially, but I think you can probably understand better than anybody else what I've gone through for the last 5 weeks in regards to trying to get a single person with the chief investment officer who will play a big role in this. 70% of their time will be in this, and I still won't get that appropriation approved by the commissioners. But I'm not going to give up on it. So I think that you, better than anybody else, understands that I'm not, over the next 4.5 or 5 years, going to give up on what I think is a really good way to do things. You know, I don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers. I don't think I do, but I know this is a great way to go about it, and we're going to look at the staffing issues probably every month. You know, I hope to be able to come back to Land Bank and say we got enough money in here to hire somebody else. And the same thing with DCFA, that their 1/2 of what the net is would allow them to either hire consultants, because I know they can't hire employees right now. But I think, Mike, you bring up a good point, but that's probably the thing that's probably at the front of my mind in regards of all this, honestly.
Yeah, and particularly commercial properties. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world if there's a commercial property to reposition it, that the DCFA is involved, because they might even be able to add additional stuff to the sale of it. Like I said, it's the residential ones that, you know, once again, it's once you get a process down, it'll be easier. But like I said, it is all good stuff. It's just we need to make sure that Bob's group isn't stretched too thin, and we're, you know, tracking parcels and missing, you know, big deals with, you know, manufacturing and stuff like that.
I 100% agree. You know, Dave Eflin and I talked offline 3 or 4 weeks ago about a specific piece of property that right now is in the tax foreclosure situation. You remember which one I'm talking about, Dave? The one the city's unhappy with about all the artwork in the front yard and so forth and so on. And that's a prime example of what we're talking about. They owe us currently $28,000, and what is it, Doug, in back? Lincoln tax is about $18,000. I asked Doug to drive by it and take some pictures, and he came back and said, Don, I don't think it's worth $50,000. We had this discussion with Dave Eflin, but this is one that's in foreclosure right now, and it's probably not going to get a bid on it in those 2 sales. And so, I mean, you know, and that's probably going to be our first example of what might happen. We're going to get a piece of property that, frankly, Dave, how much do you think the cleanup's going to be on that one particular property that we talked about a few weeks ago?
I think you'd have to budget probably $20,000-$30,000 without knowing, you know, if there's asbestos or anything else in the property, which, in our experience, it's just sometimes that can be more than the demolition cost of the property itself. Sometimes, you know, the report comes back that there's not much there. But, you know, we've also talked about a property not in that bad a condition, but very, very small over on Columbus Avenue. And I think another residential one, to Mike's point, you know, how this goes into our policies, you know, how could we dispense with some of those properties that just don't appear to have a lot of value, or they have a lot of other issues, and just try to redevelop them. And that's probably more so on the residential side than maybe some of these commercial pieces in the aggregate. So those are things to think about. I guess I had a question in here, kind of along Mike's. I shared that with Dottie. Does Bob have a capacity to do his regular jobs, and then this as well? Because of the Dottie, you said we might have tens of properties, you know, maybe 50, 70 properties that could come into the land bank. There's a lot of work there.
And you did.
A lot of work there. And this intergovernmental agreement looks like, to me, if I guess I'm looking for clarification. Looks like it's between the finance authority and the county treasurer's office?
And we probably are going to add, I'm going to answer your question, because you did ask me that question a few weeks ago when you and I talked about this specific case. Let me answer the one question first, and I know Bob wants to answer, and it's the same question that Mike just asked. Basically, what the treasurer's office is doing right now in regards to a position called the chief investment officer, we're going to provide the initial funds through the DTAC to fund the staff that's needed until we can get it up and going. Then I'm hoping that this board will then say, okay, do we have enough money? Why don't we hire our own staff? Because as you'll see when we go through the bylaws, the articles and the bylaws, it allows us to hire and pay for, staff, including an executive director. And at some point, hopefully soon, in the next year or so, for both the land bank and for DCFA, DCFA will be able to get the commissioners to allow them to hire staff to help, and then the treasurer's office can pull back from this CIO so they can go spend time on what they really need to do. So all I've tried to do as the new treasurer coming in is figure out a way to do this and get it started, and then hopefully the land bank board will see the need to go out and hire people, as well as the DCFA, to make this thing work. And that way we keep Mr. Fromer happy, and we keep Jeff and Gary happy as much as we possibly can. And
I'm always happy. Hey, also, the fire department would love nothing more than all of them to burn down structures that don't to be there for some training exercises, so.
yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to.
You find any-
I'm trying to figure out how to. The treasurer's trying to figure out how to come up with money to help them with their financing of their new firehouses that at least 3 townships want to do. So.
On the staffing side,
Sometimes,
if,
Mike, that takes more money
yeah.
to do it with the fire department firms. That's what we found.
So on the staffing side, if you look at this, to the main goals, you'll see 2023 is listed as when the land bank hitting sustainability. And the thought there was, if you've seen my other plans that I've brought forward over the last 6 years, they're all in 5-year increments. I'm a big believer in 5-year increments for your plans. This is a 2-year increment because I view this as leveraging existing resources to reposition the land bank, not as a permanent solution to the situation at hand. And I think the DCFA brings a variety of contracts to the table that can help with this. We have brokers on contract. We have engineering firms on contract that can address environmental needs and things like that. We have legal that have dealt with disposition of property and foreclosure before. So we have a lot of tools already that we're already covering costs of that can be used to leverage for the benefit of the land bank and hopefully streamline that process a little bit.
And then the only other point that I want to make is I want to introduce Jeff Jordan, and I have a news release here. Jeff, why don't you pass this out if you don't mind? Give one of these to each one of the commissioners and Sarah and so forth on the news release. But the reason why I want to introduce him is because I have the ability. Jeff's going to run. He's going to be in charge, along with Doug, of the delinquent delinquent real estate taxes that in some situations we haven't had any payment since 2007. It's hard to believe when I say that, but we haven't had any payments on any real estate since 2007, and this is one of the issues that has fallen through the cracks. But anyways, the reason why I bring it up is that the treasurer's office has the ability to either slow down the process, well, it can't get any slower than it is right now, but to not speed up the process in regards to pushing properties to the treasurer's or to the prosecutor's office to have them file pre-foreclosures or to file the foreclosures. And so if the land bank isn't comfortable with this process, then I can probably for the next 6 months to a year keep this at a trickle instead of saying, okay, Jeff, go ahead and refer up to Tyler's office. You know, we know that we have 950 plus parcels that are severely delinquent on their real estate taxes. Again, some that haven't made any payments since 2007. And so we can keep the process at a bare minimum, or we can increase that process and push them upstairs. Now, once they get pushed upstairs, something that Tyler and I have been working on is how do we push along the foreclosure process? Well, one of the biggest time constraints in a foreclosure process is the title commitment, ordering a title commitment pre-foreclosure, and sometimes that has taken 60 plus days, I guess, because there's no money to pay for the title work up front. So the discussion has been, well, Ranky, you know, when you get funds appropriated by the commissioners into the DTAC fund, hopefully tomorrow, would you be willing to set aside $100,000 or $125,000 for title work, so that when we do title work pre-foreclosure, that can get done in 2 days or 3 days, as we're 60, so they can get paid as they go, which is something that we're probably going to do. But what I'm saying is that we have the ability to, based upon what you all want to do over the next 30 or 60 days as we work through this strategic plan that Jeff mentioned a few minutes ago, you know, how quickly do we want to do this, and how quickly comfortable do we feel that we can process it properly? And so, I mean, that's something that y'all need to tell me, because I will be working on the faucet. And if you say, hey, we feel comfortable that you can open the faucet up, then we'll have Jeff push up to the prosecutor's office, you know, a higher percent of these 950 parcels. But if you're not comfortable and you don't want to do this, and you want to continue the things the way they've been, that's okay too. I just have to ratchet back the faucet, because I don't want the system to break at the other end and all these properties kind of go into Never Never Land. So that's the 25-cent overview of the program.
Don, I'll ask you a question. People haven't been paying, if people haven't paid their taxes, they should be encouraged to pay their taxes, I'll say it that way.
And I can guarantee you that's what we're about to do,
So,
Gary.
So, well, I think I'm agreeing with you. We have this balloon, this excess right now, but as it works itself off, in theory, I'm just talking out loud, you tell me if I'm right or wrong, in theory, some of these costs will go away after you get through this bubble, so to speak. Because the bubble's been created over the last 10, 11, 12 years, correct?
My crystal ball doesn't show it that way. I think you're going to have a larger percentage. First of all, the real estate tax base in Delaware County is growing by leaps and bounds because of the development that's going on. You know, when you look at how many parcels that the county's adding of new residential parcels or commercial parcels or all the parcels, I mean, we're adding substantially a large number of new parcels every year. And so the percentage, and obviously we're in a really tough economic time right now. And I'm concerned that, you know, we may go into a super inflationary period over the next 4 or 5 years. And if we do, then, you know, I think you're going to see an increase in the number of people that aren't paying their real estate taxes, and that will probably have to go on contract with us and, you know, work out how they're going to pay those taxes. But once you get behind in your real estate taxes, it's hard to get caught up, because 6 months down the road, you got another payment. And 6 months down the road, you get another payment. So I don't see the problem ever going away. I think the goal is to get it down to something that's manageable. 950 is not manageable. I think that, you know, 250 may be manageable. But, you know, I'm only about 45 days into this job. So I'm still trying to get it all figured out too, and it may take me a little bit longer to try to, get my crystal ball clear enough to be able to better answer that. But right now, I don't see the problem ever going away. Do we reduce it? Yeah, I hope so, because that's what we're supposed to do. But it will never go away. And I think that this process that we're talking about today, at some point, we're going to get to a stability to where we're stabilized. So you're not getting 4 or 5 properties a month. The land bank's not getting 4 or 5 or 6 properties a month that they have to think about taking in and starting this process with. Maybe it gets down to maybe 1 property a month. And maybe that's the goal, but it won't ever go away.
I'm referring to the excess. I realize it would be an ongoing issue. So you kind of answered my question.
I mean, we haven't stopped the foreclosure process. I mean, we provided, unfortunately, it was late in the day, but we do have about 10 properties that are in the foreclosure process right now. Well, maybe not quite 10, because some of them have not sold, but 7 or so. So, but we've taken the time to try to lay out where all these 950 are in the county. And that's the map that Bob gave you. And he and Rick Carr have spent a lot of time on this over the past 2 or 3 weeks trying to define this presentation. So I think it's going to be a continual defining, as I see it, over the next, 4.5, 5 years.
Okay, Bob, is that the end of the presentation on the IGA?
Yes, that's all I have.
Okay.
Just so you know, Delaware County Finance Authority did approve it based upon the land bank's approval of it. So.
Okay. Okay. I just saw this literally an hour or 2 ago. I think we need to study it, and there's some good policy discussions in this material that we need to consider as well.
Yeah, and the reason for their approval was they wasn't sure timelines or things that were needed, so they wanted to just put the ball in the land bank's court. So.
Okay.
Mr.
And
Chairman,
again-
can I ask a question?
Sure.
I think Bob made a presentation that I think I saw on the screen back there, but it was very small for me. If there's any way that could be emailed to us as directors, just so I could actually see it. I was trying to follow along, that would be helpful.
Yeah, sorry, I thought we were sharing the screen so you could see it on the Zoom, but we will get it out to you and everyone else.
And then I think reference was made to the start of a strategic plan. I wasn't sure if that was for the land bank or for this arrangement that we're contemplating, and maybe that was part of that presentation too, and it'll be in those slides if there's something else in regard to that, it'd be, I'd like to see that.
Yeah, I mean,
As well as part of the review. Then I just had a budgetary question. I didn't get the 21 budget. I think, Don, you were showing some of that too, so if it's possible to get that. But I was looking at the 20 budget, the 20 actuals, and it's just, I think my ignorance of how this works is that it looks like we budgeted for the DTAC about $75,000, $34,000, but in 2020, it looked like the actual revenue from DTAC was $356,000. Am I reading that right?
Yes, you are reading that correctly. And I will go back and there were the 2021 budget, which was part of the presentation that Bob just put on, needs further updating, which I mentioned I'll be doing after this meeting, and probably we'll spend more time on it starting next Monday. I want to see how things go tomorrow with the budget appropriations situation before I get too far into this.
Why the big difference between what we budgeted and what came in DTAC? Is there any sense of what you have of why that was so different?
It was a mistake. It was a typo. It was a typo, Dave. It's a typo. So I didn't really start working on, I really didn't, I noticed that a 2021 budget was not done when it should have been done last November. That's the first problem. The second problem is that, the last 3 weeks I've been working on budgetary issues far more than anything else. And so I will correct the typos after this meeting or by Monday or Tuesday of next week and send out a new draft of the 2021 budget, which we can, discuss if we want at next week's meeting.
No, I appreciate it. I guess I was just saying the difference in the DTEC budgeted amount versus the 2020 actual amount was there was a lot more that came in than I guess we had anticipated.
No, that was,
Is that like a one-time thing or something that?
no, it was Dave, that was a typo.
Oh, that's a typo.
Yeah, it was a typo.
Okay. That was my question, because that would be you probably can hire staff if we were anticipating this coming in.
Well, but I do think it's going to be about the same amount for 2021. So yeah, we can hire staff, and I think that Jeff mentioned earlier in the meeting, he used the word strategic planning, and you brought it back up, and I'm hoping that this board decides to get I hope they take under consideration that maybe we should spend the next 60 days doing a strategic plan.
So is it fair for me to look at the intergovernmental agreement, kind of what you're laying out here, between the Finance Authority and the Treasurer's Office providing good support for the land bank, really with Bob and other staff. And it looks like this would be for a year, for 2021 or so. So is it fair to look at then kind of Bob's role or some other person's role, kind of like what's outlined in the Land Bank's Code of Regulations with respect to kind of an executive director, or maybe it's sort of an interim executive director? Bob was mentioning, a 2-year period here to kind of look at this. I'm just trying to figure out how we dovetail this with the operations of the land bank. And obviously, we're just getting started. We've only handled one property so far, and that's the county's property, and we're not done with that.
The answer to that is yes. I think that we can look at Bob's role through the intergovernmental and/or the chief investment officer position that I hope to fill on Friday again as the land bank executive director and maybe coordinator, at least for the balance of this year. And then, as you said, see what we want to do for 2022 in regards to hiring our own staff. So the answer is yes, from my point of view.
Yeah, from
That's helpful. Then would we look at would the land bank then have to be part of this intergovernmental agreement?
It will be.
Or maybe that's a stock question. I'm just trying to think this through in my own.
We've already, when we get to the point, I mean, obviously, based upon what Jeff just said, we're not at a point where we're going to make any decisions today. But when you see this agreement next, if the board wants to see the agreement again, and I guess that's a question too, the land bank will be made a party. They'll be made a party of the agreement. That's already been, actually Tyler Lane actually made that recommendation, and we just haven't had time to update it. So yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So my question is, does the board even want to go any further with the discussion of the IGA, or should we just?
Oh, I think
Drop it.
we clearly need an IGA. I mean, I think, again, the Land Bank, Finance Authority, Treasurer's Office, need to have a formal agreement in place, because they're all distinct legal entities, and sharing resources is great, but it does require this sort of agreement, and these things are not, they're complicated.
Yeah.
So-
And there's liability issues that I want to make sure are very well clearly defined on the
Oh, yeah.
DCFA side of things as well, especially if
Yeah.
there's an expectation for taking a property.
Yeah, so, so again, I think, yeah, and clearly the land bank needs to be part of this IGA. I don't know if we need 2 separate IGAs or 3 separate IGAs or one combined. I mean, again, those are the kinds of questions,
Yeah.
but we do need, and I think it makes sense. I mean, again, big picture, this makes sense to pool resources. I still have the same concerns. Bob, you and I talked about this when we first talked about the finance authority taking an active role in this. Is does your team have the time, and with additional resources, and
I think with the staffing that the treasurer's office is talking, that goes a long way, because it won't solely be myself or my office handling. I think with the contracts that we have through the DCFA, they're of a lot of value to the land bank and the operations you'll be undertaking. Once again, I go back to 23 was a very specific target for me, because I did not want to go out 5 years on something like this. I view this as a couple years to get things up and running. You see the land bank become in a situation where it can make decisions on how it wants to proceed further without having any kind of revenue concerns. I view the land bank very much in the same light as the Delaware County Finance Authority. 5.5 years ago, when I came on, $15,000 in the bank, no pipeline, no processes, no structure. Today, almost $3 million in bank, owning real property, $3.25 million revolving loan fund, running a PACE program, and that's all come because commissioners have made choices to invest in economic development. I see this in a very similar track and able to help the community in the same way.
right.
Well, obviously, I want to talk, but to you, get some more information, but your mission, I've got to be convinced it doesn't affect your primary mission, and I'm not convinced of that at this point in time.
Okay.
And, because if we get you distracted, and there's no good answer to what I'm about to say.
Mhm.
If you've got the staff to do it now, then you're overstaffed. So I'm saying there's no good answer to the question. So you're darned if you, you're darned if you don't.
No, I don't. I'll tell you right now, absolutely, I do not have the staff to do this by myself. The only way this works is if the treasurer's office is willing to dedicate that person they want to hire to helping about 70% of the time on these types of activities. Otherwise, no, my answer to you is I'm not properly resourced for this endeavor.
I think we made that point really clear about me trying to get a chief investment officer in here, that 70% of their time would be focused on this. And then if I need to throw additional resources at it, that's what I'll do before the end of the year.
But there will be an end of the year. So anyway, enough said. I need more information I have currently.
I just kind of want to echo what Mr. Ranke's already said. I mean, Bob, I hear what you're saying is you don't have the staff, but if the staff was added to the treasurer's office, that would offset that. And to kind of echo what Donna said is, yeah, the problem is not going away for sure. And in the coming years, we're kind of like playing a game of Yahtzee. Who knows what we're going to get, especially in the next 3 years in the 5-year outlook. It seems like a very simple plan. I mean, I'm almost too simple to the point where I think, okay, what am I missing?
And it's just to touch on that real quick, and my apologies to interrupt, but just to make the point, because maybe I didn't make it very well previously, and my apologies if I didn't. The reason why I see this as an IGA with the DCFA and not just with the County Commissioner's Office is because even the County Commissioner's Economic Development Office doesn't have the availability of resources by itself that are available through the DCFA. There's a lot of contracts, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I think, and Zach, maybe, I know you looked at the budget a little bit ago. I think we're north of 300,000 now in consulting contracts annually. So that's where a lot of these resources would come into play to help repositioning and being able to get it out to the market. But Delaware County Economic Development Office by itself, no.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay.
And my final thought on it, and I guess this is kind of directed at Gary, but to everybody, let's take the next month, and and please think through everything, and if you have a better recommendation than the plan that's been laid out, let's get it on the table. I definitely think that, that's a process that we should go through, and if the way that we've laid it out, that the treasurer's office would front the expense of the salaries and cover it for the first year or two, if there's a better way to do it, then I really would welcome your thought process. I really would. And, we've got 30 days. I don't think we're going to probably talk about this again until the next meeting. So, if you want to, and it's to everybody, if there's a better way to do this than what we've laid out with, and I'm sure there's got to be a better way to do it. Just if you want to forward that thought process to either Bob or myself, then we can get it on the agenda for next time and get it incorporated into the plan, and we can discuss it at the next meeting. But I think that's very reasonable.
I think that's what I'm asking for, is time to digest this, and I trust the other board members feel the same way. And we see what we have, and then it's pretty hard to make an assessment till you know exactly what you're talking about.
But I think your point is well taken in regards to, is this unduly too much for, the economic department to bite off and chew, and if there's a better way than the treasurer's office upfronting the cost of these salaries and wages for the next year or two, listen, I'd much rather have, I firmly believe we're underwater as it is. And the more things that we find that have been dropped through the cracks, the more, we're dealing with on an everyday basis, aren't we, Doug? And so nothing would make me any happier than to use the resources that I'm hoping we're going to get soon to get there. But if there's a better way to do it, I would be very appreciative that, that gets put in the mix by next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks, everybody. And again, the mission is admirable. We need to collect those taxes and do the property repurposing and so on. But it's a very complex topic, and we do need more time to study the alternatives and do the legal work, because the legal work has to be done carefully. Okay. Let's hope the other 10 topics don't take an hour each.
We'll have a problem if it does.
Yeah, I know. So anyway, again, thank you, Bob. Thanks, Zach, for doing all that and initiating. I'm hoping we can have the conversations in the coming weeks so that in a month we can hopefully get to some decisions, as far as the land bank is concerned. 2020 financial review and annual filing. We've done the financial review. I know, Don, you're going to make some changes to that one schedule, but the annual filing, I know you'd mentioned that there is what was it called, a Hinkle report, I think?
Correct.
That has to be filed by the end of April.
And it has been done.
It has been done. Okay.
Yeah, we had to get Mike's former treasurer's name out of the Hinkle system, and we've been able to do that and get mine uploaded, and we filed the report, which everyone got a couple weeks ago. We've actually filed that,
Hinkle
filed
was filed?
April 15th. So the deadline was April 30th, so it's been successfully uploaded to the Hinkle system.
Okay, good, thank you. And we'll come across these things. This has been an organization that just hasn't had much activity, so we haven't tightened up all the policies and all the reporting and planning and so on that we need to, and I want to applaud everybody, Doug, Don, everybody for identifying and working on those things, because it's going to get a whole lot busier, and we need to make sure we're doing it completely and thoroughly. 2021 budget, again, we've seen the first draft of that. I know, Don, you're going to keep working on that a little more. The Code of Regulations review. We adopted the Code of Regulations, I think it's been 3 years ago now, when we first formed the land bank.
Or a second, according to this.
Yeah, so almost 3 years ago. And there, I've spent some time looking at it in the last few weeks, and there's a whole bunch of, again, same thing, there's a whole bunch of things in here, in terms of policies that should be developed, reviews that should be done, and now that we're much more active than we had been, I wanted to make sure everybody got a copy of the Code of Regulations. I know, Don, I think it was you that spotted that we hadn't presented an annual budget. And there's some other things, the
Annual meeting.
annual meeting, we hadn't done one. We need to do one this month. We've got it scheduled for next Wednesday. There are certain things, certain ethics policies, et cetera, the code of conflict, waivers that need to be obtained. So.
Annually.
The what? I'm sorry?
They need to be done annually.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to, again, make sure everyone got a copy of the latest set of Code of Regulations, spend some time going through it. There are some committees that maybe we could set up, as an example, an executive committee, which is a topic for later. And so, anyway, any comments or questions on the Code of Regulations?
Thank you for putting it on the agenda, and thank you for giving everybody a copy. And I agree with everything you said. I mean, it's something that we should routinely review.
Yep. Yeah, there's some interesting things in there that I just didn't know about. It's a long, complicated document. The land bank regulation or legislation was a long, complicated piece of legislation. So, and this is a draft. What we approved was a draft of the Western Reserve Land Bank Conservancy. Yeah, that they gave us a template. So this is a code of regulation that's been created by people who have been through, the land bank associations, the land bank creation and management. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. So again, if anybody has any comments or suggestions, as chair, I will try to make sure we do all the things we're required to do, such as hold an annual meeting, present a budget, get the conflict of interest waivers, et cetera, that are contained in these regulations. Speaking.
One of the things that I found to be a concern is going back and reviewing the minute book. We really haven't done a very good job with the.
Did you keep that, Doug, or were you keeping the minute book? Or I know we always distributed minutes. I'm not sure we kept them separately in a book.
Mike, Treasurer Ringo, the former treasurer, was keeping them in a notebook, which I believe belonged to the Economic Development Department. So I think Mike had kept a copy of, I better double check. I know he kept a copy of the agenda. I would have to check to see if the minutes.
What about preceding him? Did he have those by chance as well? Or do we?
No. So again, I've spent a considerable amount of time from last November to March 1st and trying to go through a variety of things. And the reason why I bring it up is, I'd like to work with you, Dave, since you're the current board secretary. I think that you need to sign, after the minutes are approved, they need to go to you for signature. You need to keep a copy of them, Dave, there in the secure files there at the city. Send them back to my office, and we will keep a corporate minute book, properly kept corporate minute book, both at your office and at the treasurer's office. But right now, if you were to say, did we really approve these, articles of incorporation, and did we really do these policies and procedures? I can't give you an answer to that because I can't find in the minutes where it shows. So we need to do a much better job, and if you'd work with me on that, Dave, I think unless somebody has a better way to do it, once the minutes are approved, like today's minutes are approved for last meeting, they go to you for signature, and then you make a copy and send me a copy and keep a copy, and then that way we have two separate sets of corporate minute books that, can be reviewed by whoever wants to review them.
Did you ever be able to locate all the past minutes to your knowledge?
No.
or not? No?
If I can interject, any minutes I have taken, I have on my drive downstairs.
Yeah.
And these meeting minutes, now that they have been approved, will go to Dave for signature. I did add that line to them because we didn't have the secretary beforehand. So I can help fill in some of those blanks, but any minutes before the ones I started, before I was asked.
When did you start? A year and a half ago, maybe?
Maybe. I wouldn't know where those are.
I'm not sure anything was written up.
I was gonna say it'd be, Don, I'm happy to work with you, but I think Sarah's kind of the key here too.
Yeah, she's gonna have all the records
She
that are
distributes
there.
these and puts them together for us, and, again, the code of regulations calls for, I think it calls it a recording secretary, which I don't know if that's the role that I'm filling right now, or, as a practical matter, Sarah, it kind of does that for us, so that's, I'm very appreciative of that. But I was also looking at this, I appreciate you sending these out, Mr. Chairman. It was helpful when I reread them again too. It's been a while, but it prompted me to go out to the county commissioner's website and see, because that's referenced here a lot, where we could, post the meeting agenda or post the minutes that are approved, that sort of thing, or our policies. And I think I found one link off the treasurer's office that looks like it goes to the program that we had authorized to put properties on. There's no properties on there. But it seems to me that, off that county commissioner's website, off the government offices and agencies, I think the county finance authority has a link off there to a page, and it probably would make sense if we could make a land bank page off of that, and we could fulfill some of the, some of these requirements with respect to putting the agenda up there and minutes and those sorts of things too. It just seems like an easy way to do it.
I agree.
Yeah,
But
good point.
just so you know, Dave, the recording secretary is an officer of the company, and you're it.
What I do for the
Until next week, we gotta vote again. So maybe I'll,
That's right, until next
last
week.
2 weeks, maybe I'll nominate Sarah.
Well, you can't nominate Sarah unless this group wants to make her ex officio, but you're more than welcome to nominate somebody else as long as it's not me.
I don't promise it, but I've kept,
I
I've
just
kept,
think we could tilt up the website, especially if we're gonna get a little more active, but.
as Sarah knows, after every meeting, I keep the notebook, everything that was discussed in that particular meeting. And I think I've done that back to the beginning, so I may have a copy, I'm not guaranteeing it, of all the minutes, and you know where the books are.
Yes.
And I was doing that before you. I think I may have given you to put in the book before you became. So we may have most of them.
Yeah, I think we'll have most of them. I know I've kept all the electronic copies. I think that's been most of them.
Yep.
So,
And what I do for the transportation district or improvement district is I keep both signed minutes and then signed minutes. I save a PDF to that. And I do post the agendas under the bids and notices page at the bottom of our page, the main page. So they're there until the meeting's over, and then I usually go downstairs, take it off, because it's no longer pertinent. So, FYI.
okay. Very good. Well, thank you. Sarah, we'll count on you to run herd on gathering what we've got. And then we'll put it in a book, distribute the book, 2 books.
Okay.
So again, thank you. That's one of those things that, we just need to tighten this up and do this the right way. Okay, that's a code of regulations, conflict of interest. Part of the code of regulations is that there shall be an ethics policy, and it will be reviewed and not waivers, but acknowledgements, I guess, signed annually. We do, in the material that was sent out, the conflicts of interest policy is included, or was included. It, and it's, I don't know if this is one policy, Scott, I don't know if you know or not, whether this is one policy, because it has a chapter 1, conflicts of interest policy, and then a chapter 2, general ethics policy. And there is a waiver, annual statement for conflict of interest that's required to be signed. So I'm just bringing it forward as a topic. Don, you've got the Ethics Commission?
Yes,
Coming
Susan
next-
Willett is scheduled for the annual meeting at 2, so, and my suggestion in regards to the conflict of interest policy, which I think we have approved, but we have not approved a ethics policy, which is the second piece of that, which we need to approve. We need to put one together and approve. And I think that the state requires, the Ohio Ethics Commissions require all new board members, elected officials, appointed officials, senior managers to get Ohio ethics training. And I thought it was within the first 30 days. Tyler thinks it's the first year, but trying to remember what Susan told me last week when I talked to her on the phone. I thought she said 30 days. I thought I read it said 30 days. But anyways, next week's meeting, and she said it would take about an hour, would meet that requirement for all of us as elected officials or as township whatever are on the land bank. So it will. So, my recommendation is after we complete that training next week, or that hour training with her, that we approve the conflict of interest policy. I can ask her to try to send us what she think would be a good ethics policy that we could review and approve. And then after that, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we then annually sign a conflict in ethics.
Yep.
So,
Agreed, and that is something that needs to be done annually. I do it on all the other boards, but we just missed it here up until now. So again, good. Now, Gary and I have been through the ethics training as elected officials. We've been through multiple versions of that.
Well, and also CCO board.
Yeah,
And
so
of course,
I don't think we're technically required to participate next week, but I certainly plan on.
well, if you don't want to, you don't have to.
No.
I'll be there.
I think it'd be
I'll be there.
good for you. See, I have to do annual educational requirements for my Ohio real estate brokers,
Sure.
and and I'm one of the old souls in regards to brokers' licenses, and I'm still required,
Yeah.
to take so many hours every year. So I'm off the hook too, but I'm looking forward to it. So I think it's really good, and to get it done by Susan Willett, who's the program director, is, I think, a real positive. So
she is planning on coming here.
no, she's going to do it by Zoom.
Oh, by Zoom.
Yeah.
Well, that's
So we're
fine.
gonna do it in this room, or we're gonna do it, I saw
Well,
things
we're
in
that's
Hayes room, but
that's being discussed between the three amigos here in regards to whether or not we have capabilities upstairs or not. So that will get to, hopefully by tomorrow.
We are Plan B, how about that?
we have the
This
building
room
good
is
here.
Plan B.
That's fine.
We've done it here before.
We can go to your office, either place, it's fine.
But I think you guys will be I think everybody will be very pleased with Susan's presentation. So,
Don, real quick, the conflict of interest policy that Jeff just referenced, it's titled Chapter 1, and Jeff, I don't have a good answer to you why it says Chapter 1 versus Chapter 2. The Chapter 2 is titled General Ethics Policy. So assuming there's some minutes out there, and I'll have to admit, August of 2018, I was yet to be involved as counsel for the board, so I'll have to go back to the extent that Sarah or anyone else can't find them to see how far back my minutes go that I've been sent copies. There's a
Okay.
general ethics policy in there, now whether you can make it
Well, but I agree with you. I just think that I think from what I can see from the minutes, and again, the books that I have are pretty loosey-goosey. They adopted the conflict of interest, but not the ethics. And they should have adopted both. But regardless of that, I think that it's good for this board during its annual meeting every year. My recommendation is during its annual meeting, which we're required to have by April 30th of every year, that just as a matter of routine, we update the conflict and the ethics policies during that annual meeting, just as a matter of good business to do.
Yep, to your point, Don, you're correct. CCO, first meeting every year, we hear the same thing you heard the year before, but it's good practice.
Every board I'm on, same process. We just haven't been doing that consistently. So. Okay, conflict of interest, we'll cover that next week, hopefully get that nailed down. I appreciate Don, you working on that. Next one is, we've got 4 policies that we have had in the past, and I wanted to get those in front of this board again prior to the annual meeting, because typically you would review policies at the annual meeting. But I want to make sure that this board saw these. So these are the 4 policies that we have had in the past. It's a demolition policy, maintenance policy, acquisition policy, and disposition policy. And we spent a fair amount of time initially working on these and getting them to where we were comfortable with them. But since then, we've not really spent much time updating them. So anyway, I'm interested in everybody's thoughts on those policies. One thing that I wanted to point out on the disposition policy is that related to the Stover property, where we were talking about possibly donating that to Habitat, we don't have pricing guidelines. The disposition policy does reference pricing guidelines. I don't think we've ever had any. I did a lot of work over the last couple of weeks trying to find examples of pricing policies or guidelines even with other land banks, the Ohio Land Bank Association, and I'm really coming up blank. Basically, what I've learned is there are a lot of land banks and they handle a lot of properties, but they do it basically at market value. Kind of is the general guideline or principle that they use. They sell their properties through brokers, listings, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of times they're unique properties and they do unique solutions to get rid of those properties. They'll donate them. A lot of them donate vacant lots or properties even to Habitat. When there's little to no value, a lot of them just do that. They just donate them to Habitat or another charity that will repurpose it, because that accomplishes what they're after. So I guess where I'm headed with this is I don't think there's a pricing guideline policy or a segment of this policy to include. I think it's more of a pricing principle, and that would be when possible, we sell the properties at market value, and that's done through third-party transactions. When it's not possible, and the Stover property is example A, I don't think you'd get a broker to list that. It's got clearly de minimis value. It didn't get any offers at even $11,000. So I think we need to have kind of when possible, we market it and sell it in arm's length transactions through third parties, or when it's unusual property with de minimis value, we look at other alternatives to dispose of the properties. So again, I don't have any language drafted or anything, but that's where I'm thinking we ought to go with the pricing guidelines, because I do think we need to have it in the policy. So anyway, thoughts?
My thought is this. I think where they're going with this pricing policy is the ability to have somebody on staff to do a quasi appraisal. So when a property comes into the land bank, that it's appraised. Now, how I look at that, based upon, my past experiences, could we get into the multiple listing service, or could we get into the ability to look through deed transfers to come up with similar properties to be able to put a value on it. Now, as we talked about last time, the question that, that I had asked Dave about the particular property is, does this property even meet the minimum city requirement for a lot, which I think is 50 by 110. I think I remember that. And Dave, you're obviously the planning director, you know that better. But the answer to the question is, it does not meet the minimum requirement, or at least I think it doesn't meet the minimum requirement. But where I'm going with this is that, the Treasurer's Office does have an appraiser on staff, and, the policy could be that, we could give it to the in-house appraiser and let that particular person try to come up with a value or pricing policy based upon what the comps are out there. Because even if we would give it away to, let's say that, that 3 members voted positively to give it away, and this is hypothetically, then we would still want to be able to have some value, because I think we would have to report that in our annual report that we're required to do, that this is what we thought the value was, and it was a donation. And, even though we're a not-for-profit ourselves, we would have to put it on the books as writing it off, that we thought it was worth, $40,000, when a standard lot in the city of Delaware is worth $100,000 or whatever. Because we'd have to include that in the audit, at least the way I see it. So when we look at a pricing policy, I go back to my real estate days and say, okay, you can go out and have a realtor or have staff go out and look at a comparison of properties that sold, or we could turn it over to our in-house appraiser and say, okay, tell us what you think the value is. And I think that's more in line with what's supposed to be being done here, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Todd, you asked the question, Dave, but I'm not sure Dave either didn't hear it or was waiting for you to finish.
It should work.
Regarding, was that lot big enough to even build on? Did Dave answer that question, or?
I think it is, isn't it, Dave?
Well, he didn't really answer it last
didn't answer
time.
that, was curious.
He didn't really answer it last time, and I think he did that because he did that on purpose, that he didn't want to answer it. Did you? Or you get your earphones back in there, or did they fall out?
The Stover property, I think that's what you're talking about, Don?
Oh, no, I'm happy to answer anything. It doesn't meet the R4 zoning district basic standards, and so it would fall squarely under a non-conforming, pre-existing single-family lot, and that precipitates a number of things we have to look at. Just even if land bank isn't involved, if somebody wanted to build on that particular parcel, some of those things, it may meet some of the non-conforming requirements. It may require a number of variances to be applied for, approved, ultimately to even have a single-family home built on there. And then there's the practical side of the equation, just being as small as it is, putting, whether you're Habitat or market rate, putting a single-family structure on there that just makes sense in the marketplace. And so I think talking to Todd at Habitat, he was even struggling thinking about how to do that. And of course, they deal with a lot of maybe substandard lots, I'll call them, non-traditional lots. But he was willing to try. They've done some Habitat houses in this area, I think on this street in the past. So it would be a little more complex than the straightforward, it meets the zoning, and you could obviously put a structure on this parcel today.
So the question very directly, if this was donated, would the city ultimately approve it for a house?
They'd have to do
Obviously, I can't speak for the city council or the board of zoning appeals, but for staff, I think we would definitely support any kind of reasonable application to put a single-family house on here, particularly a habitat house. And I think I've said that to this board, I said it to Todd, I mean, it makes sense if it can be worked out.
But it would have to go in front of the planning, it had to go in front of the planning to get a variance, especially on the side. When I look at it, it definitely would not be anywhere near the side back requirements between lots. Doesn't even, and it would be a very,
To the non-conforming section of the code, which does have some allowances for a single-family structure on a single-family lot. But there may well be, and I haven't done a full code review on this lot. I normally do that with somebody like Todd, if Habitat was bringing their structure forward, that we would kind of do that together. Trying to avoid a variance if possible, but if it's not, then have them bring one of those forward.
well, then the other question that I have.
Yeah, we try to support that.
The other question I have is that, would you waive your height variance because to get the needed square footage in your city code for a single family, which I think is like 950 for a single family for a single but that's for a single story. But to get the needed square footage for a single family resident, you'd probably have to go 4 stories. So it would be quite a unique design on that lot. You might have to get a height variance. I say that in jest. You
might have to go more vertical, particularly if you want to create any kind of yard space.
So I guess my question,
Those would be the kind of things we would look at with Todd. I guess we would just kind of, in a holding pattern, at least I was talking to him, pending this kind of discussion on this lot with the policies. And I do think it makes sense to have the pricing, I think it's referred to as guidelines.
That's what the policy says.
But some of those guidelines, too, there's also policies on disposition and the land bank trying to facilitate, I think the word, transfer to local governments, nonprofits, and for-profits. So it would seem to be like this particular property in the city of Delaware, in my experience, would have very de minimis value. It would have a number of entitlement processes that it may very well have to go through even to build a single-family home. But Habitat has negotiated that process, navigated that process successfully in the past. And I just, policies aside, I think it makes some sense and it would return a vacant lot back to the tax rolls.
Okay, well, I'm
I guess
interested.
if we get one of the 50 or 70 Don was talking about off of the list.
I'm interested in refining the policy. And so now that using that Columbus Avenue lot as a talking point or as an example, I think is great because and that's what we're going to be dealing with. Land Bank is going to be dealing with a whole bunch of non-conforming, unusual properties that have problems. And so, we know that's the world we're going to navigate in.
on a property like that, wouldn't it be better to work out something with the two, I assume there's neighbors on either side, would it be better to work out some arrangement with them than try to put a square peg through a round hole or whatever that is?
Well, interesting, in the disposition policy, there's a whole segment on what they call side lots.
Yeah.
And that's what.
I haven't read that was but that might be a better solution than trying to create let's say a difficult situation, which I think could make us look bad if it ultimately, we give them property, they can't do anything with it, and then what happens to the property?
I think that we need to give a lot of consideration to the properties we take into the land bank. I think there needs to be a lot more research done in regards to the properties that are coming through foreclosure so that the land bank isn't surprised when they show up and there's a discussion of whether or not we even want to take them or not to begin with, because I think we avoid a lot of this by just saying, why would we even want to take a property when we know we're going to have a hard time, finding a
And there
solution
is,
to
the
it.
acquisition policy does address issues like that.
And I-
And again, these 4 policies also were presented by the Western Reserve Land Bank Conservancy, whatever, I don't remember their exact name, maybe you do, but, so these are real-world policies based on real-world land bank experiences, so there's some
Agreed,
history behind it.
except there are only 4 policies. And so, Jeff, there should be 20 policies or 25 policies that we look at.
Maybe.
And again, I'm hoping that, you know, if we decide to go with an IGA, that, you know, we could have staff resources to be able to say to the board, here are the other 20 policies that, you know, are under consideration for them to put into it. But one of the things that has to tie together with any policy that we put together with is, which I think is very important, is the budget. Because none of these policies are any good unless there's a budget that stands behind them. It says we have the ability of the funds to be able to actually meet the policy through the approved budget process. So it's like the chicken and the egg, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I brought this up, and again, wanted to make sure that everyone had copies of the 4 policies that we've been working with. And again, I think they need to be reviewed. We've got an annual meeting coming up next week. I would hope that everyone could spend a little time, and maybe we can approve, or make changes and approve these next week. If not, we can do it at the next meeting. It's not anything that's critical at this point, but I do think, kind of in line with the ethics policy, we need to refresh these and move forward with them.
Just an observation on the demolition policy. I think reading between the lines, it's there, but it's not real clear. Asbestos survey, for example, if it's a raw piece of land, it's really not an asbestos survey, but it's not real clear on here, because it says land bank will order an asbestos survey from a qualified asbestos consultant. I think we need to make some clear distinctions. I mean, I think it's obvious, but it probably ought to be stated. So just.
Yep, and that's the sort of review we're looking for is, and again, we can spend hours fine tuning these policies, and we're gonna deal with unusual situations every month on this thing. So, again, we'll move on, but I just want to make sure everybody had it. I'm anxious for comments, et cetera, as we, for next week's meeting, and if we can't get them, then we'll do it the following meeting. Sunny V update.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
If I may chime in, I'm sorry, I have to take off in just a couple of minutes, so I didn't know if there was anything else that you wanted my input, perhaps the memo of understanding.
Yeah, the Tussock Street land MOU, we can jump to that.
I mean, seeing the memo via email was the first I, maybe it's been mentioned before, the Tussock Street property, but I didn't know that it was being contemplated. But for what it's worth, this memo of understanding is very similar to the one that was entered in from this board and the commissioners relative to the old jail.
Hey, Scott.
Yep.
Dave has a hard time hearing you if you're
Oh.
not at the podium, sorry.
Sorry.
Nope. Oh, that's
Dave, is
right.
that better?
Sorry, Dave.
All right. This memorandum of understanding appears to be very similar to the one that was entered in between this land bank and the county commissioners relative to the old jail. However, unless I've missed it, I've reviewed it a couple of times, I didn't see any provisions relative to ongoing maintenance. It does talk about the commissioners of the county would pay for any transfer fees and closing costs, title work, things like that. We did discuss at some length about, okay, what happens with the old jail if there's a roof leak or the ongoing maintenance, something breaks down. So please forgive me if I've missed that in here, but I don't see any kind of language to say following the transfer, who's gonna mow it. As I understand it, it's a maybe 1.2 acre lot or something like that. It's pretty wide open, a bunch of grass. So as far as ongoing maintenance, I guess I wanted to bring that to the board's attention. Nothing else jumps out at me that I wanted to bring to the board's attention for consideration. But that was one thing. So.
Okay. Yeah, my understanding is that the land bank would be reimbursed out of the proceeds for any maintenance expenditures. I'll check with the attorney to make sure that language is in there.
Mr. Chairman, this property's in Genoa Township, I think. Do we have any sense from the township leadership what, or the plan, what its calls for this property to be?
It's a 1.2 acre vacant residential lot, right on Tussock Street.
And from what I've been told, I haven't seen it, it is very buildable,
Yeah,
and it's an excellent lot.
yeah, we've had a number of inquiries from people who want to buy it to build on it, a home, residence. It's zoned residential. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's right in the middle.
I was just looking at the aerial photographs of the county auditor's site and kind of clicking back through time, and it looked like the site was used for, I don't know, maybe staging for when Tussock was
Yeah,
widened at some point in time. but
yeah. That's it exactly, Dave. It was used by the
There's some
engineer.
stuff on there, so I don't know, it just made me think about our previous discussions about, is there any reason for us to think that we need to do there's some kind of environmental assessment before we took possession of it? I know we've talked a lot about that before.
Well, the county already owns it, so one way or the other, if there were any environmental issues, the county's on the hook.
Well, that's not necessarily true when it comes to us. So,
What
once
do you
it's
mean?
deeded, once you quitclaim deed it to us, you know, you talk about quitclaim deed. If you understand what a quitclaim deed is, it's basically, you know, buyer beware. It's
Yeah.
all on, you know, you have no, you know, you're gonna get it. And I know that, you know, we've had Scott as well as Tyler look at the protections that we have in the Ohio Revised Code, but, you know, I'm concerned we're biting off more than we can chew in regards to this. And then when I look at, you know, the whopping 2% that, you know, the land bank's gonna get for all the time they're gonna spend on it, I'm not gonna vote for this. I just don't think it's worth our time or the potential risks that we take. You know, and the question about the maintenance, you know, we need to hire somebody to do the maintenance. You know, obviously, we're gonna have to get insurance on it, even though it's a vacant lot. We still have to get liability insurance on it.
Okay, I mean, I'm not concerned about liability. It's a vacant lot that we can get, SFM will place coverage for like $2 or $3.
Well, there's still liability with a vacant lot.
The what?
There's still a lot of
Well, sure there
liability
is,
with a
but
vacant lot, huh?
We will get liability insurance. SFM has quoted that for vacant lots. I think it's like
We
$2 or
haven't even
$3.
got to the point where they're gonna come next week to try to explain how we add properties. And
Yeah, they did that earlier. We had that conversation at the last meeting. How do we add properties?
well, we didn't have that, Jeff.
Yeah, we did.
No, we didn't. That's the reason why they're coming back next week.
That's
We
why
can
we-
agree to disagree, but
we-
that's why they're coming back next week, to figure out how to add on properties to the policy, because they can't even quote it as quickly as we would need to have it, you know, so.
You know, again, we're skipping to the Tussock Street, but we may as well go ahead with it. You know, the county already owns it, so if there's any environmental liability, the county's gonna eat it. You know, the land bank has environmental protection, so, and again, we're just trying to repurpose properties, because right now that property's sitting empty and the county's taking care of it, and we're doing the maintenance and so on. Why not get it back in the public sector and get, you know, a house built on there that's gonna pay taxes and take care of it and so on. So, you know, if you wanna try to change the percent, I mean, yeah, 2%'s low, but the land bank will hire a broker to sell it, so.
And
Well,
again,
those
I'm
costs
not,
are reimbursable anyway, aren't they? We, all the costs, we're talking about
Yeah.
2% of net, aren't we?
I don't know if it's net or gross, but the land bank does get 2%. I'm sure it's in there defined.
Well, it should be net, because obviously you got real estate commissions, et cetera, that would come out of that.
Yeah. So, I don't know, anybody, other thoughts? Mike, Dave, Gary?
For what it's worth, Mr. Chairman, looking at the previous aerial photographs, it does look like it did have a house on it, kind of like the Columbus Avenue one at one point. in time.
Yeah,
So I guess if that's the proposal, that it fits for myself, if it fits the Genoa Township, comprehensive plan and of course their zoning, then, it could make some sense. And county commissioners don't want the property anymore.
Well,
Yeah.
the county didn't initiate this. We had several potential buyers approach us about that property, so it's not a property that we identified we wanted to get rid of. So that's how it evolved.
right, that's the background.
So we believe there's a ready market there.
Dave, my understanding is the engineer, when they did their renovation, reconstruction or expansion of Tussock Street, there was a house on this property that they had to take and tear down because it was so close to the street as widened. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that would be, you would see that,
There was a barn or something too.
I think maybe it was
it
a barn.
two structures.
yeah. So, anyway,
So we really don't know what that house, if it had a basement or whatever, was it filled in with the debris? Do we know that? Was there a gasoline tank there from a farmer from, 50 or 60 years ago? Do we know any of that?
I don't know. I can,
I mean, the only way the only way you would know whether or not, there was, the appropriate fill dirt put in that hole would be to do soil borings.
I mean, the county bought it like in 2007, so presumably they went through the appropriate measures to make sure they weren't taking over an old oil tank or something. So again, we own it.
Yeah, I know. And now you're trying to quitclaim a deed to the land bank.
But the land bank has those protections. So, okay. How about this? How about we talk to the engineer, get those questions answered about the process when we acquired it and whether there's anything there, and then we bring it back at the annual meeting? I mean, or,
Yeah, we're not prepared to discuss it today, obviously.
okay. Well, we'll go that direction. Let's see, Sunny V, update everybody on that. Really, nothing's happened since the last meeting, other than I've done a bunch of research on getting environmental assessments done, and I have 3 or 4 environmental firms that various people have referred to me. So, I'm interested in everybody's thoughts. I think we're probably in a position where we could go forward with doing an environmental assessment, but there's
Well,
other
I would
thoughts.
recommend that since you've done all the legwork already, do you mind, putting out a bid process and asking these 3 or 4 firms to provide a bid to give us either or a phase 1, give us a bid for phase 1 and give us a bid for a phase 2, and ask all 3 to do that?
There's actually 4, a 4th one was added, so probably should include it as well.
Yeah, so because we don't have any staff right now, and you've already done a lot of the legwork, it seems like, could you ask them to, provide us with a bid, one to do a phase 1, and a second bid to do a phase 2, and ask all 4 firms to do the same, and submit them, within a certain period of time, whether that's the next 10 days or the next 20 days, so that we can make a decision with moving forward with, the environmental phase part of it. I think the other thing too is that I think you had sent an email that you had talked with my predecessor about what we could or couldn't do before a property actually came into the land bank, and there was some discussion that we could go in and look at property to try to determine. And frankly, I think that's a good idea. I obviously have a lot of precautions that we need to take, especially with that building. I would suggest that 1 or 2 of us, at least 2 of us on this board, would be brave enough to want to go through that building. I would suggest we wear protective gear, especially for our lungs. Because if pigeons have gotten through there because of roof leaks or broken windows and they're dead pigeons, pigeon dung and pigeon carcasses are very dangerous to the lungs. And I know that for a lot of not good reasons, but anyways, I know that for a couple of reasons. So I think it's a good idea between now and the next meeting and before we get these bids back that, yeah, we probably go through that. I would suggest that Mr. Eflin be part of that two-person committee since he's with the city anyways.
Dave, I'll go with you.
I'd be happy to do that, and we could probably ask my chief building official if he might be interested in accompanying us and just offering any of his thoughts if the board is interested in that.
I'd be happy to go through it. I could do it.
So you get a second, and I think it's a great idea to have Mr. Warner to go through that. I don't think he's retired yet, has he?
Oh, no, I'm not letting him retire.
Anyways, so I think that would be good.
Yeah.
Are you volunteering to be the second?
No,
Mike did.
Mike
Mike just
volunteered.
volunteered to be the second, you know. And I think it would be good to be able to do some kind of report, because, I mean, obviously I'm concerned that there's been roof leaks, you know, because I don't think anybody's inhabited that building in the last 18 years. So it'd be nice to be able to get a preliminary report from two of the board members that have gone through it. It would especially help if Mr. Warner went through it too. And that way we could look at all that. Because I do think we should have a procedure on how we determine whether or not we want to take a property in or not after it comes to not being sold at a foreclosure.
So that's the acquisition policy. I mean, it is gonna need fine tuning, but we do have a policy.
Okay, if you say so.
We do. It may not be the policy we need.
Only two of those four policies, from what I can see, were actually approved at a board meeting, but I'm not gonna debate it. I do think that the acquisition policy needs to be updated to include the discussion of how we take a property in after it's been a no bid process with a foreclosure, and what we wanna do to determine whether or not we wanna do it, and this is a good way.
Should we take it over?
Yeah.
Right, and I think this is something that trial by error, we could, you know, do on this particular property, and then hopefully incorporate that into updating that policy, Mr. Chairman.
Mhm. That's what I'm looking for. Let's update those policies. Okay, so Dave and Mike, you'll figure out a time to don the hazmat
Yeah,
suit and.
I don't know if Scott left, do we have to give any kind of notice or to the landowner, can we just, Mike and I can schedule time?
I think once my understanding is once the auditor has the property, the land bank has the power to go in and inspect.
I thought Scott brought that up at the last meeting, that we did
Yeah.
have that authority to go in
Yeah.
at any time.
He didn't bring it up, it was in an email that Jeff sent out. I think it would be good to kind of probably have Scott look at that. You know, my thinking too is that this board, the five of us, should have credentials. That if we do that, we have credentials that say, you know, we're members of the land bank, and on the back of it have the ORC where it says we can go in and do this. You know, I say this in jest, but I think, you know, we probably ought to get like a sheriff's badge that says land bank on it instead of deputy sheriff or sheriff, you know, so that, you know, if the cops show up or the neighbors call us or somebody's in there just because they're squatting and decides to shoot us or shoot one of you guys that want to do this. So I do think we need credentials, but I think, you know, but I think, you know, we probably should ask Scott to look at that.
Yeah, maybe for this one, Scott could just give us an opinion, maybe a letter that says basically what Don just said for this particular property. We can have it with us if we need it.
Okay. All right.
can tell you, there have been people that have gotten into that building, so
No, I'm sure there have been.
we'll just bring a big flashlight and make a lot of noise.
In the meantime, I will go ahead and get bids on phase ones and phase twos, just so we have it ready to go. Sunnyview Jail update is next on the list. I've been in contact with Shayna and Skip and Scott and Steve Martin, who's representing the buyers. And I'll just read this to you, it's short. I just asked Shayna yesterday, what's the latest? Shayna said, no new news. I emailed Steve Martin yesterday asking about the title commitment. It is due on the 26th, which is next week. I was following up with him to get an update on that. We've done everything on our end to this point. They have not called to schedule any inspections. Scott provided them with the survey and legal description for the contract. That's where we stand currently. Let me know if you have any questions.
They were not required to do an inspection,
No.
so that may be,
But they have-
to, and
what
they had a
they-
time frame.
What we built into that contract, what they built into that contract, and that this land bank agreed to, although it has to be ratified by the commissioners, was 4 months for a contingency period. So they really don't, if they want to wait the entire 120 days to do anything, they can. I hope they don't do that.
That's for their variance, isn't it?
They have
Any
basically
potential variance.
anything.
But I thought they had a certain time frame for the inspection and the title work and survey. I thought
Once
that
you
was
put a,
part
once
of
you,
that.
once you give them a certain period for contingency period, that they can opt out of the contract, they can basically use, that entire time and give you whatever reason they want to opt out, even if there are date specifics for inspections and things of that nature. I mean, it's just, I can see why we gave them 4 months. I don't have a big issue with it, just usually a long time.
So, anyway. They
Are the
are,
commissioners gonna ratify the contract anytime sooner, or are they gonna wait till after the contingency period's over to ratify
no,
it?
Mike approved the agreement. So that was the condition in the MOU, is that Mike had to sign off on, the county administrator to sign off on the agreement, and he did
Okay.
do that.
So that's been done.
Yeah. So, again, I think it's up to Steve and Scott to keep things moving, and I know the historical society really wants to move forward on it, so they're moving. Again, I'm just saying, here's the latest. I don't think we need to do anything at this point. They're gonna keep moving on it. Executive committee creation discussion.
We can talk about that actually next week. I was gonna do that next week.
I just want to present the idea, obviously, so.
I think it's a great idea. It's obviously in the,
in the code.
in the code. When I mentioned it to you on the phone, whatever it was, 3 weeks or so ago, in my mind, I had thought at some point, we as a board, we're allowed to take this group from 5 members to 9 members, okay? And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, this is a lot of work for the 5 of us. Do we at some point in the near future want to go from 5 to 7? It talks specifically in the code about who you'd like to have on the board, find somebody that could be from the not-for-profit sector or somebody who has a lot of real estate background that would be helpful. And so I thought once we went from 5 to 7, an executive committee would be a good idea, because at that point you could have 3 members out of the 7 be on the executive committee. The executive committee would, what the executive committee would be used for is that, let's say we get 4 or 5 new properties in the land bank a month, for 4 or 5 straight months. It allows the executive committee to move the processes along on behalf of the board until the board can ratify what the executive committee did at the next meeting. And I do think it's something we need to think about, but I think it's also something that we should think about taking the board from 5 members to 7 members. And I think it would be more reasonable at that point to have an executive committee, because it'd be 3 out of 7 members instead of 3 out of 5. My thoughts.
Yeah, no, I wanted to put this on the agenda because I think an executive committee makes the board more functions quicker. And most boards I've been on have an executive committee. Now, most of them are larger than 5 people, so your point is very valid. I don't think we want to do it at this point, but if we expand it, then maybe, or even maybe before, because things are going to start getting busier, and 3 people is a lot easier to get together than 5, and you got to go through the meeting notices and so on. So anyway, I think it does make sense. Other thoughts, Gary or Dave, Mike?
I think it makes sense.
I'm good with it.
I don't
Yeah, with the conversation.
think it makes a lot of sense with just 5 of us, but if the board expands in the future, I think it makes more sense to me to try to focus on maybe this intergovernmental agreement and whether Bob and the treasurer's office, if we could get some staff, since we all have day jobs too. Seems like we got our hands full with that and kind of tilt that up and see how that goes.
That is all the formal agenda. Other things I wanted to talk about was the Columbus Avenue lot, which we've covered. The D&O policy renewal we have a proposal. I think, Don, did you get that? Or
It's already been accepted, and it's in, we have it,
SFM.
it's in, it will be effective on
the 15th
April.
of May.
It's already effective. Maybe it's May 15th.
It's May 15th, so.
But we've already, it's done.
That was part of what we did last month?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just want to make sure.
And I just sent a copy of the actual policy when I got it the other day.
The tax foreclosure list that you sent around, this was, again, it's actually, I think, good, because we're seeing a lot of progress. I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that were 7 that were sold or paid in full.
Mr. Chairman, I'm
So-
sorry, I had a question on the insurance. I
Yeah,
think Don had said earlier, he had remarked that this is done and it'll go in place, but that he was concerned by the level of coverage of it.
Correct.
That maybe it needs to go up. Is that something to, obviously, we don't have any kind of lapse in coverage, but is it something to put on a future agenda to look at that?
I would like to see it. We have $1 million D&O insurance policy. That's for the 5 of us. And so if there was a claim for directors and officers liability insurance that was over $1 million, then it would be a problem. You know, I would recommend strongly that there's $1 million per member, or in this situation, that we would increase it from $1 million to $5 million.
we do have an umbrella,
I know.
so that doubles.
I know, but the umbrella, you know,
The umbrella's there for a reason. We pay for it.
well, yeah, but have you ever tried to use your umbrella insurance?
Thankfully, no. I've never had
Okay.
to use my liability coverage,
Well,
primary,
I have.
so, okay.
You know, it's not that fun to be in the assisted living and nursing home business. But anyways,
Sure, yeah.
all I'm saying is that it'd be better to have $1 million D&O per member and $5 million versus the 1. And I recognize we have an umbrella, but the umbrella's not that big either, considering the amount of liability the amount of property that we could take on. You know, that's just my thought.
Well, I'm fine with increasing it. I think you're making a valid point. The $1 million is low. But-
$1 million is very low.
I mean, the history partly was, we didn't have any properties.
I know.
So why,
I think
why,
as we ramp up, though.
yeah, why have $5 million of coverage when you have no properties, so there's nothing going on?
I agree.
So
The times are
now's the
changing.
time. So I can get SFM to quote 5 million and $1 million each.
That'd be great.
Is that
Well,
what you're
he's gonna
thinking?
be here, Mr. Smith's gonna be here next week. I mean, I'd be happy to make the recommendation that we increase the D&O and liability insurance from $1 million to $5 million. I think that,
Well, I mean, we don't have a quote. I'd rather have a quote before we increase it.
that's true. We can ask him for a quote. I'm
Yeah.
just saying that, he'll be here next week.
Yeah.
I mean, I can send him an email this afternoon and ask him to.
You want to take care of that?
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't think the cost would be that much more. The extra millions typically don't add a whole lot. Okay. Let's see. I think that's it
I have something
on
to
my list.
clarify.
Sarah, you got something?
Yes, if we could go back to number 9 real quick, with the environmental study,
Yeah.
I have written down that Don Reiki made the first, or moved to have you go ahead and get
I'm just gonna get bids.
okay, you don't have a second vote on it?
I don't think we
Okay.
need it. That's not
Okay,
getting bids is not,
At the
Come
last
back.
meeting, we had directed him to,
go ahead,
Okay.
bid
do
it.
research on this, I
Yeah.
think it.
Okay.
that was-
I just want to make sure we're all on the
Yeah,
same
before I
page.
would commit anything, I'd come back to the board. We'll do that presumably next month. But no, good question. The foreclosure list, Don, any other comments on that? Again, that's very helpful. I think.
I'm going to present that at every meeting. I'll bring you a new list. But I just want to, again, remind you that we have 950 parcels.
Yeah.
Now, Jeff and Doug have done a pretty good job because when Jeff started, we had 1,060, and they have been working at it pretty hard, and we're now down to 950. And to your point, Jeff, it looks like we've been successful in getting some of the properties sold and getting 100% recovery during the foreclosure process. And that's the reason why, I think we'll get 5 to 10%
Right.
of those properties out of the 950 that won't get a bid and that will end up in could end up where the land bank could get them. And that's the reason why I specifically brought up the example of what Dave and I had talked about with Doug on the phone about 3 weeks ago. Because that gentleman that owns that property had actually come into our office about 3 weeks ago, and he had been put on a payment plan. So that my predecessors came up with this payment plan that would allow people to get on a payment plan, and it allows them over a 5-year period to pay back what they owe. Problem with the payment plan is they forget to make the payment at the next, they don't make the next payment of their taxes when they're due 6 months later. And no one's tracked any of these parcels. There's not currently we have no software program to track these contracts. So we don't even know where they stand. And a lot of these contracts have been around for over 10 years. And thus, that's how we've determined that some haven't made any payments since 2007. So my only comment again is that, the land bank could get pretty busy. I mean, I think what you see today is that slow stream. And just want to make you aware that, you guys, we could be busy if you wanted to be.
Don, let me ask a question, the payment plans, they don't show up on their tax bill? Is that possible?
Oh, no. So Dave,
On a payment plan,
You better explain to them who you are.
I'm sorry, I'm Doug Crew with the County Treasurer's Office. On a payment plan in our MVP system, we can flag it up to 60 months, anywhere from 1 to 60 months. The property owner chooses how many months they want to do. That determines their monthly payment. The understanding is they make their monthly payment and their current half taxes are due twice a year. The issue is Don has brought up is we don't have a tracking system to see who's following that plan other than manually going in and checking it. And staffing wise, that takes a lot of time to do to make sure everybody's current on their payment plan. Once they're on a payment plan with our office, we flag it as a contract and we print those bills, those half tax bills internally
not through our vendor, and we send out a contract bill twice a year to let them know their half taxes due.
And then you know when they pay then, or
Well, they're supposed to make monthly
do they
payments
make it
on the delinquent part.
and if they don't, you're aware of it, or
No.
That's where we're lacking,
theoretically?
yeah.
That's
Yeah,
where we,
right.
that's where we're gonna do better in the very near future. And again, you know, I'm very appreciative of the job that the staff has done over the last 8 or 10 years. They've really done a great job, and so it's just hard to stay up with. I mean, we're such a growing county, and the responsibilities continue to grow every day, so it's kind of hard to stay up with all that. So, but we're going to try to get caught up real soon, aren't we? So, but we do continue to find new surprises every day, unfortunately.
Yep. Yeah, that sounds a lot like how banks collect their delinquent loans. Very familiar with the process, and the challenges. Okay, that's all I have. Anybody else have any other business? Dave, anything else before we adjourn? Sarah?
I am done.
All right. Okay, well, next meetings, we've got a meeting next Wednesday, 2 o'clock, just 1 week from today. We'll finalize the location, but presumably it'll be in your shop. And then the next regular meeting, presumably, if that's okay for everybody, would be next, it'd be the third Wednesday, May 18th, or 19th, can't read it.
Yeah.
May 19th at 2 o'clock in this office.
Yes, ma'am.
That work for everybody?
Works for me.
On the calendar.
Dave, you good with May 19th? Okay. All right. With that, we stand adjourned.